Hi everybody, it's Chris Hout, and welcome to the 5th Weekly Word Pod Blast. I'm so glad you could join me, and I'm looking forward to discussing a few topics with everybody today based off of a lot of your inputs and emails and questions and texts and so on. So the first thing we're going to cover today is recovery, whether it's recovery from races, recovery from being sick, recovery from travel, recovery from a big training block. The main point here is how to go about it, when to return to regular training after a race, for example, and when to return to regular training after being sick, and things like that. So just also going through some general sensations that you might have when you're recovering, and general information for all of you on what recovery means, what the purpose of it is in our training, and why there's times you have no recovery and we go directly into the next training block. Recovery obviously came up for me in the last 2 weeks, since it's been today 2 weeks since I raced my 100-mile run. And I also have a few emails from some of you, whether it was racing Santa Cruz 70.3, a bunch of you were racing Ironman Coeur d'Alene in late August, and the general theme seems to be that people are struggling to return to the fitness that they had, whether it was a few weeks before the race or just in general to get their overall body sensations back, to feel connected, to feel alive while running, biking, swimming, or any of the things that we do for our sport. The other aspect that came up with regards to recovery questions was that some of you are now struggling with injury, which is quite common a few weeks after coming back from a major endurance event. The challenge is that we often start training a little bit too quickly. I try to keep you all away from it. But people get antsy, people are motivated, people had a strong input with regards to a race and seeing where they are and how they're progressing. And they're antsy to get going with their next training block, with their next focus and progression towards their next race. And in that, we might feel okay recovering from the race. We might feel good walking around in our daily activities. We might feel actually quite energetic as we're going along here a couple days after the event. But deep down, there's still some lingering fatigue. Deep down, all the little damages, all the damage you did to your muscles while racing, whether it's the pounding of the pavement or just the length of distance, in my case, of a 100-mile run, that it takes a few weeks, yes, a few full weeks for the body to regenerate itself, rebuild itself, and be able to absorb more pounding of the pavement, more trails, more cycling, more swimming, especially in the case of shoulders and soreness and power in them. So the big aspect here of recovery and why I'm addressing it is also to avoid injury. And the common or the first way I often hear about injury coming from a race is that the IT bands and above the knee or the hips are still quite painful or sensitive once we return to training. And that manifests itself 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions later, where it just becomes almost unbearable to run or even to do whatever exercise it is you're doing. In some cases, swimming, the shoulders are still super tight, the lats are in extreme pain, or the tricep. And so some of you have heard from me with regards to that being the cause from training too quickly again after an Ironman or a major event. Interesting enough is, since I go through all these sensations with all of you racing, whether it's Ironman, half Ironman, or some of these ultra runs, I noticed last week I tried to run a little bit. I had a plan to run about an hour and a half, real easy on trails, but about 35 minutes in, I noticed also my quads were still completely shot and fatigued. And this was 8 days after my race. So I thought, an easy hour and a half run should be possible. But at 35 minutes, I already turned around and started heading home, whereby the last 10 minutes was basically walking because my quads and then quickly my IT bands became very tight. And I knew if I continued to push through this, that an injury was waiting to happen. So the purpose of recovery is primarily allowing the body some time, some rest, a period of time for which it can regenerate. It can rest and rebuild itself. There's a variety of physiological markers there and things happening, but I am not going to spend this time on the podcast going into the exact details of what's happening on the muscle site and how that regeneration works. But in general, it's quite a lengthy process. It's a slow process. And if we're not careful with that process, it can quickly result in injury, illness, as well as just a general fatigue that it takes quite long to get out of. So your ability to recover also improves the fitter you get. That does not mean that after a race, you're able to recover that much quicker. It's more how quickly you're able to resume easy workouts. Many of you know from my Ironman training with you that I usually give you at least 2 weeks completely off post an Ironman. That allows you to not only regenerate and catch up on your life a little bit, but it really allows the true painful aches and niggles and potential injury spots to really work themselves out. Many of you have noticed that 3-4 days after an Ironman is when you really get tired. 3-4 days after any ultra endurance event. Your sleep and your general fatigue catches up to you. The body has emptied itself of all the excess water, and the swelling has gone down, and the hunger picks up, part of the regeneration process. And in general, your fatigue, your sleepiness as you go about your day has reached its peak. And you're actually sort of surprised in many cases how strongly it hits you. That's usually the first sign of the body actually recovering quite nicely and having found the time and the peace to actually start without threat, for lack of a better term, to start rebuilding itself. It is recognizing that you are not going to put it through that type of stress again, and so therefore it has switched over to regeneration mode, to rebuilding mode. From that window, I would give it usually about another 7 days before we do any type of structured training or working out. So now it's about 11, 12 days out of an Ironman. Most of you are getting quite antsy and really do want to train quickly again. You have goals and motivation in front of you. But as you have always heard from me, it's all about being healthy, about being able to absorb a workout. There's no purpose in just working out to working out. That's called exercise. And if we're going to train for an event, we want that workout to be part of a progression towards getting better, improvement, as well as progression towards your goals. And many times training on a broken body or a severely fatigued body from an ultra endurance event is not helping fulfill those two goals. Early on in your Ironman fitness, I would say in general 6 weeks. It takes about 6 weeks to get your body back from an Ironman. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get your body back from a half Ironman. That's early on in your Ironman training, meaning early on in your first few Ironmans, as well as your first few half Ironmans. As we get fitter, the body does regenerate and rebuild itself quicker because the effort and the event itself was more familiar. It's less of a shock to the system, and therefore the regeneration, the rebuilding, the resting part can happen quicker, and it took less out of you. You went less deep into the well, I would say, in order to rebuild yourself then again. That's why you often hear stories about how there's professional Ironman racers or even elite age group racers who have the ability to bounce back and race an Ironman 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even in some cases 1 week after having done an Ironman. So there, it's just a question of how much did the race actually take out of them? Was it just a longer training day? Oftentimes you need to see, or you need to understand that pro will back off on the run, DNF, or slow down dramatically in pace, effort. Even sometimes on the bike, when they see that their day, that their qualification, that their paycheck, that their podium spot, that their desired outcome for doing this race is no longer achievable, and then they start backing away and seeing it as a long training day, a unique long training day that's supported, catered, as we like to say, and they can actually use it as a training effect, a race, and then they'll go someplace else 2 or 3 weeks later. So a different scenario, and not to be confused with how we recover from our ultra endurance events. So enough about that with regards to recovering from races. The main point there was to say that it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to really be able to ask your body to do some real training work again, real deliberate, focused training, and to also be very careful in that period of 4 to 6 weeks not to get injured, not to create a bigger injury that will rear its ugly head in a few weeks, whether that's an IT band issue, whether that's an Achilles calf PF issue. A lot of things can manifest itself after a hard race effort, and then training too quickly on those micro tears in the muscles, on the muscle site, or that your ligaments and cartilage are just too fatigued to really support and carry the work that you're about to do in training again, or training too hard too soon after your event. How long does it take to recover from being sick? So, of course, every sickness is a little different, and these are one-off cases that I usually work with you guys on individually. But many of you have heard the standard rule that I live by for most of your training, and that is the day that you are feeling 100%, that you have your energy back, that you feel that you are ready to train, that you have that you have your body back, I should say. At that point, I always say give it another 24 hours. Rushing back from sickness, coming back too quickly, presents different dangers, and that is that your body falls back into being sick too quickly, because just because you're feeling healthy doesn't mean you are healthy, and your immune system might need another day or two before being stressed again, not only from its daily dose of what you're doing in life and going to work and the stresses of family and life and work and so on, but then adding on to it some training whereby you stress the immune system. Even if you're training ever so lightly, an easy day, it's still a stress, and we don't want to fall back into sickness. Falling back into sickness always presents a more challenging return, because being sick and then getting sick again means your recovery takes even longer. Your immune system is even more depressed to fight that bug, that cold, whatever it is you had. So I like to err on the side of caution. I never worry about getting you, the athlete, fit again and progressing again. I worry more about a lingering cold, a lingering sickness that then takes 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 weeks to truly recover from. Whether that's fevers or whether that's a chest cough that just does not go away. Whether that's 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And those are the ones I fear the most, because they take a big chunk out of our training prep, they take a big chunk out of our fitness, and they take a big chunk out of our season if you think 4 or 5 weeks until you're back to par, until you're really absorbing and having or feeling and experiencing the effects of truly progression in your training, deliberate training. So, once again, the rule there is allow yourself to get healthy with full rest. Then, when feeling fully healthy, give it one more day. And then from there, we gradually resume easy training, see that we're doing okay with that, and then we can return to the intensity and the quality that we were working on prior. Travel is another aspect to recover from. Travel across multiple time zones, and in general, travel these days is a stressful experience. And it does have an effect on the immune system, on the adrenal system, on our sleep. So, again, allow yourself the time to recover from travel. Do not expect too much from your body when it is traveling or when it has completed traveling. Recovery for me, when I'm coaching most of you, when you're on the road, I live by a few simple principles. One is you're on the road, you're in unfamiliar territory, your body is on a different time clock, even if it's just a 1 or 2 time zones. And I just want you to train easy to get through the trip, to stay connected, to stay healthy, to stay somewhat connected to fitness and the motions and the firing of the muscles, but not to look for too much progression, too many fitness gains while traveling. And the second part of traveling, that once you're home, the goal is to get that recovery, get some easy workouts in to readjust to the current demands of work life as well as training balance. And then once that is truly back to normal and absorbed, that we can resume strong quality performance training again. The final piece of recovery I want to discuss is from big training blocks. So many might confuse when to recover and when to train through fatigue. And this is a very sensitive area to work with as a coach. And part of the main reason I really need most of your inputs on the logs from the Training Peaks and Workout Log commentary, because it gives me ever so subtle insights into how you're truly absorbing the workouts, what you're feeling, your hunger pangs, how you're sleeping, how you're recovering, how quickly you're recovering to the next workout, what the soreness factor is, what your general daily fatigue, sort of that yawny zombie state that you might be in during a heavy training load, what that might be like. And in your commentary, I can often read through many of your observations to notice if you're too fatigued to carry on and absorb, or if there is still some benefit to be found in training on that fatigued body. Training on that fatigued body has a few benefits. I'd say mainly 2. One is we no longer look at these certain paces or certain wattages or certain effort levels or certain average speeds for rides, and instead focus more on that we're tired and how are we going to get through this workout. And that sensation alone sets up a tremendously rare opportunity in our training to be that tired, to then focus truly on footwork running, staying light, on form, on getting through a run, for example, on tired legs, where you're just completely focused on technique versus any type of pace or effort or heart rate or achieving certain type of goal time. So too often, since those inputs are available, we back away or shy away or get distracted by pace or time or effort and don't use the remainder of the workout or the entire workout as designated for a footwork technique-based workout. So being this fatigued, being this tired, we generally resign to looking for any type of performance gain or performance result as we're looking at the watch or as we're looking at our final outcome, and instead stay really present and focused on form and footwork and technique. Similarly, on the bike, when we're that fatigued, your ability to pedal clean circles, to really focus on the aero position and be very relaxed in it, and just turn the pedals and not think that, oh my gosh, look how low my watts are, this is ridiculous, this is a waste of time. No, that's actually the perfect time, because we are so tired, we are able to just give up on the wattage, give up on the average pace, and instead focus on excellent riding technique, good pedal circles, efficient pedal stroke, a good aero position, and staying just in it and getting through those hours on the bike. Again, something that we rarely have an opportunity to do when we're fresh or we're not fatigued enough, because we're constantly looking at performance markers. The other big aspect that I feel comes from training tired on a very fatigued body and wondering when that recovery is coming is the mental strength that it builds. What that means is when you are this tired and you are still training through it and still have some big workouts and you still perform at a solid level, no, nothing great, nothing where you're super surprised about the outcome, but it's quite good still, or it's quite effective still, it creates a lot of confidence. The fact that you go into a race knowing, man, on that super tired day with that much volume, with all those miles in my legs, all that fatigue built up in my body, I was still able to hold X watts, I was still able to run X pace, I was still able to go for that long of a run and feel okay. I was still able to swim those 100s late in that set at X pace on that interval. That's the workout that you'll remember when you're challenged prior to a race with confidence and wondering if you're fit enough. It's those workouts that sort of surprise you, that despite having gone deep into the well the day before on a long training day or that entire week, and yet you still put forth a solid, clean, technique-driven workout that yields some good sensations, good inputs, and good results. Those are the ones that stick with you. And so the aspect of training on a fatigued body, if we can still get that mental outcome, that mental focus, that mental strength as a result, we also know that recovery can wait another day or two in order to have that rare window to really apply that fatigued body into that workout. I hope that sort of answers the questions for some of you who wonder why there is little recovery at times, and other times I'm very quick to trigger, nope, take 48 hours off, or nope, drop that workout today, let's just do an easy swim and take tomorrow off. It's all the data and it's all the inputs and it's all the commentary and the observations you're giving me, and as we're exchanging thoughts in that conversation, that's where that is coming from. The either quick trigger to give you the extra rest or to push through it because I'm looking for the outcome of the form and technique as well as the mental strength. Either or. So our final piece in the recovery aspect is also how to recover effectively from a training session. Whether that's a long aerobic training session or a short, intense, high quality, going deep into the well effort training session. And those two things, as many of you have heard, and I'll just provide some additional help, thoughts, insights, are nutrition, how you eat after those workouts, when you eat after those workouts, and sleep. So nutrition and sleep being the key drivers of effective recovery. And by the way, both those aspects are important on the early aspects we talked about. Races from being sick, the travel, and also, of course, during a big training block. But eating effectively after a big ultra endurance event for those 10 to 14 days speeds up recovery and your ability to feel better and more connected dramatically. And then sleep. There's nothing more important than sleep for all of us, whether we're athletes or not. But especially in this endurance world, sleep is the most common denominator with a successful progression in training and achieving the results that you desire from your ultra endurance events. So some of this you have all heard before, but I'll repeat it, and that is, from a nutrition standpoint, the post-exercise recovery aspect is there's two windows. One is immediately following the workout, that quick 30 to 40 minute window once you're done, on how you replenish and that refueling, what happens there. And then there's the next main meal, which I like to call it. Usually it's your lunch or your dinner, and it comes 2 to 3 to 4 hours after you finished your workout. So in that first 30 to 40 minute window, the first thing we want to keep in mind is fluids, replenishing any fluids that we lost. You can obviously figure that out via weighing yourself and knowing your fluid loss. And you can email me or text me on separate questions on how to do that. But that gives you a window to put in some electrolytes, some carbohydrates, and just in general top off the stores that you had emptied out in that intense or longer workout, especially in these summer months. Fluid loss is very, very common, and we quickly want to cover that back up. Some of you have heard me also talk about how if you're down, let's say, 64 ounces of fluid that you should have been drinking during that workout over that period of time, usually it takes about double that amount to catch back up to normal fluid levels. So if in that 5-hour ride, or in that 5-hour run, or in that 2-hour swim, you're down 64 ounces of fluid, then you will need 128 ounces of fluid, usually water, in order to go back to fully hydrated normal levels. And since that takes quite a time for it to be absorbed, and for you, quite honestly, without getting sick drinking it, it all is part of your recovery time in order to get all that fluid in and absorbed properly. In that 30-minute post-exercise window is probably also the only time that you should be having that protein. That's not to say during your main meals you shouldn't have protein, but many of you, I've found, use protein during your exercise. And while there's protein in the bars and a little bit of protein in some of the drinks and a tiny bit of protein in some of the gels and chews, some of you are supplementing or increasing or focusing your fueling, your solids, or your your food that you're eating during the workout. You're supplementing it with protein, and there is zero reason for that in ultra endurance events and in ultra endurance training to add protein during exercise. You are not having a catabolic breakdown of the muscle site like a weightlifter or somebody who is doing some serious, deeply fatiguing strength workouts. Your breakdown is gradual in an endurance environment. And yes, those stores need to be replenished post-workout, but I would not focus on them during the workout. Those are calories that are not helping you progress during the workout, and they will just sit in your gut because those proteins take longer to absorb, as well as most of the time those proteins are not in a delivery vehicle in your blood in order to get to your system properly, being absorbed properly, and therefore they are a waste of your chewing energy, for lack of a better description. So 30 minutes post, we want to get those fluids in, those carbs in, some protein in, to just cover everything that we just worked out of. And then that usually is good if that volume, the amount of food or recovery shake or snack that you had to hold us over to the next meal. The biggest mistake many make in their post-exercise nutrition is they don't eat enough at that time in those 30 minutes, and then they're ravenous in 60 to 90 minutes post-workout. So they overeat then, and then they're still hungry at that next main meal, and they overeat then again. And oftentimes they're way overdoing the amount of calories and the amount of food that they're eating post a workout, and the lean muscle mass and the weight loss in general is not being triggered the way many of you desire from this ultra endurance training. So again, 30 minutes post, give it some time. Usually that allows you to hold over to the next main meal, then eat a normal main meal that is healthy and hopefully whole foods in general, not processed foods. I don't go into all the details of how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat you should have, because any nutritionist will tell you that this is such an individual need, and then so many of us have different interests in our diet, whether we're gluten-free, plant-based, and need more carbs, need less carbs, need more protein. So, and the types of protein we're eating and how they're being absorbed by the body, as well as the carbs and what kind of fruits and vegetables. And so getting into the game of how many grams of protein or how much fat and how many grams of carbohydrates is, in my opinion, a game only to be played with a nutritionist that knows you and your training and what has worked well, and can really be done by a professional. So I'll stay away from that. So lastly, and most importantly, sleep. Again, one of the main reasons I feel I've been lucky to stay quite healthy and continuously engaged in this ultra endurance world for what is almost 20 years now, is because I get a lot of sleep every night. And of course, many of you have heard me joke about it, how I go to bed with my kids and wake up after my kids at times. But my 8 to 9 hours of sleep when I'm in good training mode, and then close to 8 hours almost every other night, is very, very important to me. It keeps me healthy, keeps me energetic, and keeps me able to train effectively day after day after day. And as many of you have heard from me so often, the whole purpose here is the repeated injury-free healthy training aspect. And sleep is the primary ingredient to that. Your ability to sleep and therefore recover from the day's workout in order to be better, stronger, smarter tomorrow and continue the progression of training is the most important part of endurance training. In order to ensure that quality sleep, I do wear earplugs when it's time or it's necessary. I live in Marin County, California, where we have hot days, but very cool fog-filled nights. So windows open and it's 50 to 60 degrees in the room, and it is cold and dark, and it makes sleeping very nice. Some of you have also heard me say that I'd rather you train less in order to get more sleep, and we'll figure out how to get more training time in, our volume in, our progression in. But if we can start the pattern of sleep, that being 7 to 8 minimum, but ideally 8 to 9 hours a night in these ultra endurance training phases, I think that is a better place to start for all of us than getting 6 hours of sleep a night, but yet we're training from 9 to 11 p.m. at night in order to get in that last 2-hour workout, since we need to get up at 6 a.m. for work. If that is the case, you, the athlete, and I, the coach, need to work better together and come up with a better training plan in order for you to absorb the training, stay healthy, stay injury-free, progress in your training. And again, I am not willing to give you that extra workout just so that it looks good on the totals for the week if sleep is being compromised. The last aspect of sleep that I wanted to go over is that many of you have noticed I am starting to add your morning rest workouts into your logs, meaning that there are mornings, at least one morning a week, I want you to sleep in. Hopefully we can plan that effectively with how we're going to work or how we're taking the kids to school or how we're doing what we need to do to get our day going. But if that means we can skip a morning workout because we did it the other 6 mornings a week, including the weekends, and we find a day, whether that is on the weekend because it's easier with family and activities, or during the week, that we sleep in, that we take the morning off and truly allow our body to recover an extra hour or 2 hours that we usually would spend with training, and instead get a good, healthy amount of sleep. There is so much happening in our body in that extra sleep, in that 8 hours of sleep, and you all know it. You all have seen the results of a couple of nights of great sleep, whether it's on vacation and noticing after a couple days of great sleep how good you actually feel. The price you pay for that is actually, especially on vacation, the 3-4 days of good sleep leave you more tired than you were before. And that is just because, just like recovery that we talked about earlier in this podcast, a couple of good nights sleep sends the body signals of rest and wanting more and wanting to rebuild, regenerate, and replenish. And it'll take the sleep if you're giving it in a pattern, especially like a vacation where you have 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 days of extra sleep. So, of course, I went over again in my podcast time, Podblast time. These are starting to turn into podcasts because I probably overtalked on these. Overtalk is a new term for podcasting. That means talking too much, obviously. But hopefully this insight, these opinions, these reasonings of why we're doing what we're doing and what the logic is behind it is helpful to all of you. You understand the training a little bit better from races, from being sick, from travel, from big training blocks, why nutrition and sleep are so important, why some athletes need more recovery than others, and what the benefits are of training on a tired body are. So hopefully we got through all your initial questions. If you have more, please send them to me. And I think the next podcast later this week, we will do season planning, how to set up your next season, how to choose your races, and how to decide which one to put where and why, and working through your strengths and weaknesses of choosing a race course. Okay. Well, hopefully you have a great week of training ahead, staying injury-free, getting sleep, being healthy, progressing on the workouts, and becoming a better overall endurance athlete. All right, thank you again for listening, and keep sending any of those questions.